So, summation of the spiritual exercises as best I can. So the first week is about recognizing that you're loved, you're inherently good, um, and at the same time you have these things about you that you keep making mistakes and you can't figure them out, which we refer to as sin, anything that would detach you from authentic relationship with God and other people. But that you're this concoction of all of these things together, but at base, God is in love with you. And so that's the first week. The second week is in light of that, you have to make a choice. There's an option to choose following other things in your life, or there's a choice to follow Jesus. And so throughout that second week, there's this process of what's the discernment that I need to go through to make a choice, and am I going to choose Christ? If the answer to that is yes, then you move into the third week of the process, where you start to identify Jesus' own suffering, both in around you and in himself. And a lot of the meditations focus on finding an inherent sense of compassion in yourself for the brokenness in others and in yourself and in Christ himself. And it's trying to find some sense of compassion and justice in you. And then ultimately it leads to the fourth week, if you respond to that. And the fourth week is about giving a deep response to God by the way you're going to live your life. So it's the crux of it is the contemplation on attaining divine love. And so how am I going to respond to the love that God has for me in light of all the things that I've experienced in the first 3 weeks? How am I going to make my life a gift?
The exercises have impacted me with regard to self-awareness, I think in many avenues, many opportunities, many ways. The first way in which it impacted me the most, and the question is also guided towards leadership, is knowing who I am and knowing who I am as a leader. The exercises call us to self-awareness, and I think Socrates says that in a life not reflected on is a life not lived well. And I think the exercises helped me to reflect on my life, to see who I am, to understand where there are obstacles in my life and where there are deficiencies in my life, but also where there are graces. And in terms of leadership, I would argue that there are many forms of leadership, and that the exercises have helped me to understand who I am as a leader through a particular avenue. I think I am much more of a quiet leader, one who would inspire other people, one who would see the gifts and talents in those who I work with. And I think the exercises have helped me to reflect on those gifts, those graces, those talents that I have in terms of being a quiet leader, but also acknowledging the goodness and the gifts of other people within their lives.
So the thing about the exercises is it's a very intense time and a very self-reflected time, probably the most self-reflection I've ever done in my entire life, which is a great thing, and it's one of the great blessings of the exercises. So you really can spend time looking at your strengths and your weaknesses and this notion of being self-critical. And so for me, the exercises just provided a time where I could go back throughout my life and become more aware. It's not that I wasn't aware, but you just become much more aware of your own strengths and weaknesses, and how God has been present in your life, and how your life has sort of played out, and how it has all been within God's plan. In my early life, I had a great deal of suffering, so for me it was just a time to sort of not necessarily relive that, but to be aware of the great blessings that brought to my life that I'm not sure I was as aware of before I made the exercises.
Indifference to me the more I've read about Ignatius and his life, is that nothing is greater than anything else.
The concept of indifference in Ignatian spirituality and an Ignatian worldview is not what we typically think about with regard to indifference. Indifference in common parlance is that I just don't care. I am indifferent. I'm going to sit back and whatever happens, happens. But that's not what Ignatius meant in terms of indifference. For Ignatius and for Ignatian spirituality, indifference is being completely available for God.
The way I see indifference is trying to make use of what leads to joy in your life. And if something isn't leading you to joy in your life, then to discard it, to get rid of it.
The idea of Ignatian indifference is, to put it simple, is I will be constant in my relationship with God and my trust in God, regardless of what is going on in my life.
The concept of indifference is pretty dynamic. It's actually pretty difficult to understand. It's not that I am indifferent in a way of resignation. It's more I have two passions, and yet I'm knowing that I'm loved by God enough that I can select either one and know that it's not about which I choose, but how I respond through that. Right before I came to Loyola, entering this stage of Regency, I was in philosophy, and they asked me what I wanted to do. And I told my superiors, I was like, I really want to go back to Ecuador. That's really where my passion is to work with the kids of the street, shoeshine boys. And when I met with my superior, he said, actually, we would like you to look at 3 prep schools, one of them being Loyola Academy. And I remember feeling, you don't even know me. Like, you know my passion is Ecuador, South America. And I was very frustrated with that meeting, but later I went directly to prayer. And I sat for a while and, God, I'm angry or I'm frustrated or my superiors don't know me. And God's saying, did you not listen to your superiors saying the gifts and ways in which you can grow? I love you and you need to listen to this. And it gave me this ability for indifference, meaning not that I wanted to give up my passion of going to Ecuador, returning back, but rather that I could see myself anew in a different way. And I think that's really what indifference is, and that was the first lesson of God's of teaching me how to be indifferent, is not to give up passions or to resign or say, well, they're not going to let me do it, so I'm going to give up, but rather to say, this is an invitation, not a no. This is a yes, a new yes, not a no.
My role as a campus minister, I think for me, involves a lot of indifference. I think there are a lot of times where we're working with students. For example, they go on a Kairos, and you have a lot of hope for the kid making some dramatic change in their life. And if I get too emotionally tied to them being successful at that, I don't know how I would stay in the job I'm in, because a lot of kids, it's hard. They don't, it's really hard to make some of the changes that they're realizing they need to make. And so, do I love and care for them? Yes. Does my well-being and my emotional state hinge on their success? No, it doesn't. I trust that God is doing something great, even if I can't see that it's happening.